My name is Julia Luey, and I serve as the president and CEO of Volunteers of America, Alaska. I have been in the behavioral health field for about 18 years and have worked at VOA Alaska for 7. And in this current role of CEO, it'll be 4 years in March. I didn't necessarily choose it. It definitely found me. And I am grateful for that each and every day. When I was about 21 years old, I experienced a series of hardships that had me very lost and seeking purpose. It led me to destructive behaviors, substance use, legal problems, family issues. It was a really dark time for me and my family. And at one point, it just can't continue. And so what do you do in those hard moments? And I was so blessed. One day, my family reached out for help, and the very next day, I was in residential treatment. And it was there that life started making more sense. And after I completed that program, I started working at another residential treatment facility that served women and children. And I worked as a night monitor. I moved into a case manager role and then a floor counselor. And then I was program manager of that program for quite some time. And I loved it. It was reunifying mamas and babies and supporting that healing process that is really difficult to do when you've experienced so much hardship and challenges. And um, so I moved into more executive leadership roles when I came to VOA Alaska, really because my passion really got ignited when I started seeing those kids that I had in that residential program start coming through as adults. And I wanted to impact the youth behavioral health system. And that is what led me to the children and youth sector of substance use and behavioral health treatment. I think a big misconception about substance use disorder treatment is that it's fixing people. It really insinuates that it's some sort of moral failing, and it's not. I think when people think about just even my family or friends about substance use treatment, you think that we're talking about substances all of the time. And yes, education is happening, kind of that retraining of the brain is happening in those spaces, but it goes much deeper than that. I think we're always kind of surprised, like in the meat of substance use treatment, you're not really talking very much about the substances. You're really talking and addressing those destructive behaviors and those thoughts and feelings that are driving it. And then trying to identify what those distorted belief systems that are really driving those chain of events. And treatment is about doing something different, like moving outside of that chain of event and kind of reconditioning your mind, body, and spirit into that sort of routine to help you move past what may have served you previously in your life. Um, and so I think oftentimes the misconception really comes back to send them to treatment to fix them. And there isn't enough recognition into like the meat of what really happens in the journey of someone's treatment process. It's different every day, and that's why I love it. I definitely shift from like macro systems level to micro, a specific issue. I feel like I ping pong between the two multiple times a day. Um, but right now in my organization, I definitely am spending a lot of time more internally because we have grown so much over the last couple of years. when I first started, we were about a $5 million organization, and we are now a $14 million organization. And so, really taking the time to pause and really identify improvements in our systems and processes, and making sure that's solid before we look at what's next for our organization. But yeah, it's different every day. A lot of ping ponging. I can't think of just one situation, but what I encounter pretty regularly is encountering the language that people use. Um, and oftentimes I think it's unintentional, but there's stigma in how we label people when we're calling them addicts, when we're, calling them those homeless people, or someone who's psychotic, or conduct kid. And I really see these as teachable moments. These are humans that we're talking about who are experiencing some sort of hardship. They're just like you and me and our family and aunts and uncles or our neighbors. Um, there's a human behind the label of someone who's struggling with addiction, someone who has unresolved mental health challenges, or a youth who um, maybe has a good reason not to trust someone, and we're calling them a conduct kid. There's opportunities to dig into the human behind the label there for sure. Yeah, I had this really beautiful experience a couple of years ago. I was walking by our conference room, and there was a gathering, and I noticed that there was a couple of staff members that I hadn't met yet. And so I went in and introduced myself, and one of the men that I introduced myself, he said, "Oh, I know you. I met you the first day of treatment." I'm like, really? Where? Um, and he remembered me from years and years ago when I was coming back to the residential program that I graduated from as an alumni and supporting. And just hearing from him, just the impact that I had during that time. It had been so many years, and you just get busy, and so it was a nice reminder of just the impact that you have throughout your career, and being able to stop and see people and remind them of the hope and opportunity that's in front of them on the day that is so scary. Like, the day you show up to treatment is super intimidating, you don't know what to do. And so it was a nice reminder of just the character you need to stay in this work, um, and what's truly important in all of it. It's those interactions that is really the anchor of what we do, and why we do it. And I'm so proud that he chose VOA to work at. It's pretty awesome. It's hard to say that this excites me, but I am relieved that youth mental health is getting the recognition that it so desperately needs. Um, Alaska, we are second in the country for youth suicide. And even, our residential program is one of the only residential programs that serve youth with substance use treatment. And substance use treatment, you think adults. And oftentimes those are the policies and the regulations and the funding mechanisms that support that work. And in a youth residential facility, we require twice as much staffing than an adult residential program. And so, what I am relieved and grateful for is the recognition that youth who are experiencing co-occurring challenges with substance use and mental health is getting the attention that it deserves, and really creating its own policies, its own regulations, and its own reimbursement structures to promote more support for these kids who desperately need it. I am so proud of the work that my team did, keeping our residential doors open. Um, with what I just described, there was a period of time we weren't sure we were going to be able to um, keep its doors open, and we engaged, just really unleashed on a series of advocacy efforts and identifying what needed to happen to improve that situation. We were successful in securing a 2-year appropriation from our state, and we're successful in integrating an ASAM 3.7 level of care into Arch's continuum, which is meeting an unmet need in Alaska, and it's strengthening the path of sustainability for that program. I think throughout the last couple of years, there's been 5 or 6 residential treatment programs who have had to close their doors. At one point, our residential facility was the only one operating. And so I am super proud that we have been able to keep the doors open and improve the quality of care that we're serving Alaskans with. I'd have to name my kids. My daughter Ella and my son Landon. They are teens, and they have been with me every step of this journey and have supported me going back to school and making a career change, and they have sacrificed for me to be as committed as I am to the mission of my organization. And so I would not be who I am if it wasn't for who I am as a mom, and their love and support every step of the way. They're pretty cool kids. I'd say buckle up. It can be really defeating at times. In this position, as I've grown up in behavioral health, and there's been moments where I have felt more hopelessness at this level than I ever experienced in more of the direct service provider positions that I've been in. And I just always have to remind myself that it's the long game when you're talking about systems change, and it requires perseverance, it requires patience, and to always go back to kind of the work that is happening to kind of fill your tank. And I try to do that as often as I can. Um, and making sure I know the kids' names that we're serving and spending time with our staff, and because that is where the real hope is, and that is where the real work is happening in the lives that are transforming. It's pretty beautiful, but you lose sight of that when you get kind of lost in the policy work and what's happening on that systems level, and it can feel disheartening. So buckle up is what I would say. Yeah, we have poured a lot into our organization, into our organizational culture, and making sure that our supervisors and our leadership have the support and resources that they need to do this really hard work. We're very relational. And so, I kind of went back and forth of like, what am I most proud of? Like the culture that we have at VOA, Saving Arch. Um, it's really both, because without that organizational culture, yeah, it's gritty, we're ambitious, but we're also learning. We're also growing, and you've got to have a culture of forgiveness too. Like no one shows up to work wanting to screw something up, like things are just hard, and just having that grace and enjoying the people that you work with, is really important. And so I really try to emphasize, especially for our leadership, how important it is for us to prioritize that responsibility to create that environment for our staff to do this really hard work. I think to never forget that we're talking about people. Um, I myself, as someone with lived experience, and even my own personal experiences, I can get lost in conversations that make a change so seem to be so easy. And you really have to really stay connected to the mission and the heart of what you do that guides each step of the way. I think people think substance use disorder treatment, kind of going back to what I said earlier, is about fixing people. And it's healthcare is what we're providing. And anyone and everyone deserves access to quality care. Substance use disorder treatment isn't any different than that.